Hi, I'm Melissa Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday and project number 14 out of Revere's professional jewelry making. This is the donut ring. Let's get started. To start, I have two pieces of metal. The inner band is going to be 56 millimeters by 12 millimeters wide, and the outer band is going to be 71 millimeters or about 15 millimeters longer and 2 millimeters narrower for a 10 millimeter wide piece of metal. Now, I have gone through already annealed and I've pickled and cleaned these up with kind of a green scrubby. So that's going to give me an even surface to begin with. First thing I need to do is I need to turn these around into a ring. Now my final ring is going to end up being about a size 7. So I want to start forming here at the size 5 mark. So I'm going to form the outer pieces or the outer edges of this ring. And if you need to, just use your fingers to kind of arrange that a little bit. So once you have this formed around just a little bit, we're going to pull this off, and I'm going to use a pair of half round pliers just to kind of finish closing this up. And my goal is to have both of these ends meet nice and tight. Just like so. Once you have this one done, we are going to repeat, and it doesn't matter that it's not perfectly round. We will take care of that after we get this soldered. So repeat that same thing on your other piece of metal, and we'll go from there. Now that I have the seams even on both of these pieces, I'm going to solder them closed. Now anytime I do any kind of work like this, I'm always going to do a boric acid wash first, and that just helps to prevent some of that fire scale. I'm going to place this onto my solder block into some grooves that we've actually created for another one of our projects. And what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of flux and flux this seam where we want the solder to flow, both under and on top. And then once we have that, I'm just going to get some solder chips, and I'll place those solder chips right here on top of the seam so that it reaches over both sides. Now in order to do this one properly, you really should have flat solder chips so that they will span that seam. You want it to touch both sides. And in this case, because we can easily remove this, we have not textured this piece yet, so a little bit more is going to be better than too little. Once you have your solder placed, we are going to flow that solder. I want to bring my heat from underneath. So first, I'll kind of warm up the ring a little bit. Be very careful not to let that flux up there at the top bubble your solder out of place. If it does, take a second to reposition it. We just want to bring this flame from underneath and just gently warm up that seam so that it will pull that solder through. And there we go. And you want to be careful that you take note that it fills the seam, but you don't want to get it too hot, as that can cause some porosity. That looks pretty good. You want to check the inside of your seam just to make sure that it looks really good. And in our case, everything looks like it flowed very well through that seam. Repeat for the next ring, and then you're going to pickle this and clean it up. Now that I have the rings done, I can tell that there is a nice seam on this. Everything went well. So now it's time to round this out. Just going to place this back onto my ring mandrel, and once again, using this nylon mallet that I have, I'm just going to round it out. It's important that you flip this over and repeat on the other side as well. And I'm going to repeat for the other band also. And now if I put these two rings together, you can see how much bigger that outer ring is going to be. And that is what we want. And that's going to help us determine how big of a dome we have on the outer ring. This is also a great time for you to stamp with your quality mark on the inside. And we're ready for the next phase. For this next part, I'm going to use my dapping block, and what I want to do is find a die where the ring will fit but not too snugly, and this is going to help us to create that convex form that we are after for the outer band. Once I've selected one, and notice that it's not too snug in here, but it fits nicely so that things are kind of up and it's going to just kind of fall into that groove. I'm going to use a second block right on top of this, and it's important that I get this flat. And what I'm going to do again is use a dead blow mallet, and I'm just going to tap down a little bit. If I pull this out, I can see that there is starting to form kind of a groove into that. And it's not enough yet, so I'm going to repeat that. And I want to flip this over and do the same on the other side. And this is very subtle, so I have a long ways to go here yet, but I want to just kind of create this nice little arc here. And I want to flip this over each time. And I don't know how apparent this is on the video, but we definitely have kind of a nice arc starting. Now before we have this band completely formed, I actually want to start on the inner band. Now here we're trying to close up the outsides, but on the inner band we want to open them. So we have a concave form. And this is going to be done by using a dapping punch that is too big. Now I don't want it to be way too big. I want it to start to fit into this, but I also want to be able to have it just flare a little bit when I hammer down on this. And again, I want to just kind of take note as I'm doing this. Be very careful, because what can happen, especially if you have a lot of solder on your seam, is that it will stay stiff right there and it ends up not forming the way that you want it to. And again, I'm just going to do this from one side to the next to keep everything nice and even. You want to take a second, look at the outer rim and make sure everything is forming evenly. You want to periodically check your progress on both of these rings. So I can see here that I still have a long way to go both on the inside and the outer. I'm going to come back now to the outer band, and then I'll repeat the same process with the inner band. And we want to get these two to be the point where they are going to fit just nicely on top of each other. So the inner band is going to flare out and the outer band is going to come in until they're about the same size. We want to test to make sure that the outer band is shorter than that inner band by about 2 millimeters. And right now we actually look really good. The other thing that I'm looking for is for the outer band to be that same size as that inner band. So I cannot fit these together anymore. They just kind of stack on top of each other. The next thing I'm going to do is reduce the inner portion of this band and doing it evenly with a half round file. You want to just use nice gliding motions as you turn the ring and work your way around, keeping it so that it's nice and even. You want to check its size to make sure that it's nice and even by placing it onto a ring mandrel. And I can see already that I'm off just a little bit on this side. So I will continue to file away and repeat that process. I want to be careful not to remove too much metal. And now our ring is spot on, so we are good to go for the outer band. The next thing I need to do is make certain that these outer edges are also even. So I'm going to use a file that is wider than my ring and just ever so slightly go around the outer edges of this. And you want to just ensure that you've got good contact on both sides of your ring. I should see a nice even rim all the way around this ring. Now when I go to test fit these two rings, they should slide one within the other. And we should see an even amount on both sides of the under ring or the inside ring around the outside edge of the outer ring. Now this is the last opportunity you have to pull these rings apart so that you can either drill a hole or pierce anything like that that needs to be done to this outer band. Now you only need to drill the hole if you are going to be soldering these together. In this video we are not. We are going to use a cold connection to kind of rivet them together basically, and then they will hold together, so there is no need to drill a hole. This next phase is similar to kind of how we set a stone in a bezel, but instead of having the bezel come forward, we're actually going to bring the bezel out. Now I'm going to use the cross peen or that fin section of a goldsmithing hammer, and I'm going to position and hold this outer band so that it sits in the middle of the inner band. And I'm just going to give a couple little strikes so that it flares that out a little bit. I'm going to move it around so that maybe, let's say we did that at the 12 o'clock position. So now I'm going to repeat that at the 6 o'clock position. And I'm going to do the 3 and the 9 o'clock position as well. So what I've hoped to accomplish here is that I have flared this inner portion so that the outer portion does not come off. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to repeat on the other side. Again, my goal is to keep this outer band centered within that inner band. And now we should have both sides locked into place because we have flared portions of this outer band. Once this is locked into place, I'm going to continue to flare and work my way around this inner band. Now, as I do this, this is a very small movement, but I'm also coming in at a little bit of an angle and hitting that band to the outside. Now I have not gone all the way around and flared it beautifully and evenly because I want to make sure that I'm doing it even on both sides. So I'll do a little bit on one side, flip it over, and repeat on the other side. And if I look at this, I have everything nice and even, and really I just need to continue to do this flaring process. Now to finish this out, I'm going to come back in with, again, an oversized punch here and just tap down gently to kind of finish that fit. And I want to make sure that I don't go down too much or else I can actually destroy the shape of the ring. If I look around, I should see a nice even spot where I've made contact with the punch all the way around. And that is looking really good. The next step, I need to file away any of this excess material that's here. So I'm going to use a flat file and I'm just going to gently remove this. Now you want to be careful not to remove too much, otherwise your ring will fall apart. I just want to be able to remove some of this outer extra metal. Now you can alternate between files just depending on what you need. So you're going to use a half round file on the interior of the ring, and you're going to use the flat file on the exterior of the ring. And you want to just kind of use both, keep going back and forth until you have that seam completely blended. Now, like I said, be very careful. You don't want to go too far or else your ring is going to fall apart. Now is also the time to take care of any excess solder on both the inside or the exterior of this ring. Now that I have the inside polished, you want to take this to a nice mirror polish if you can. That's always the goal for jewelers, right? So now I'm going to use a little different technique. This is called a checkering file, or sometimes known as a Florentine file. And the teeth in this are all cut in the same direction. So unlike the others where you have kind of a diagonal for the file, these go straight across and up and down. And that is going to leave a unique mark on our ring. So by placing the ring here up against my bench pin, I'm also going to place my file up against this, and I'm going to just drag across the top. And you can see that it leaves little lines instead of kind of that smooth finish that we would expect from a file. So I'm going to go around the ring with this and just give this ring a little different texture. And now that we have the inside completely polished, the outside textured, we're all done and you are ready to wear this ring. As with any of the projects that are in this book, there are a number of ways to make these your own. In the instance of this ring, I rolled this pattern through the rolling mill before I did any of the forming. So I would have done that, annealed it again before I started to do any of that shaping, just to keep it malleable and make it so that it moves easily. And like this ring, we've added the surface texture afterwards. So you can do either way. So now you've seen a couple of rings that I have done, and now you need to kind of determine how you can make yours a little different. A couple things that you can do is you can make this outer band longer, and that's going to give you a higher dome. A shorter one is going to give you a lower dome here on the top. You can also use different metals. So think about maybe using silver or something like that on the inside, and maybe gold or copper on the outside. Apply different finishes, apply different patinas, different things like that. It's just going to be something that you can do to make this your own. Now, as I've said before, I am not yet a master jeweler, and I am working through these projects just the same as you are, and I'm learning every step of the way. I hope you find these videos helpful. If you do, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and you will get the notifications for when I create new videos. I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining me.